Hi, I'm back from my holiday and got quite a bit to share with you this week. I've added a new machine to the game and also redesigned the trees yet again. I think I've finally settled on a style, so I can get on with designing new species soon. I actually started by fixing an issue I've been thinking about for a while. It's quite tricky to know what neighbours a conveyor belt will attach to when you build them, which can be quite frustrating. I decided it would be better to give the player control over this, rather than letting the game choose neighbours at random. The first step in this was to find all of the potential neighbours of a conveyor belt as it's being moved around by the player. Here you can see that working as text in the console. Once it's found the neighbours, it then counts the neighbours that could be a parent and the neighbours that could be a child. Parent conveyors pass objects to child conveyors. Here you can see those counts being figured out accurately. Finally, I made the conveyor belts preview their direction before being placed, and allowing the player to choose between different neighbours and directions by pressing R, the button used to rotate buildings. This has made the whole process of placing conveyor belts so much easier and so much less frustrating, so I'm really pleased with how this turned out. The next thing I decided to change before getting onto the new machine was to redesign the Lumberjacks. I thought the original design looked a bit simplistic and lacked the detail that was possible. I also thought that it would be possible to add more detailed shadows. I settled on a design with dark grey trousers, braces and a bit of white t-shirt showing under the shirt, just to make things look a bit more interesting, rather than just blue jeans and red shirt as before. The problem with redesigning the Lumberjacks though was that they had to be reanimated. The final result looked like this. Right, so next I moved on to creating the new machine. This one is called a rail loader and will be used to connect a conveyor belt to a railway, attaching to rail carts and transferring items from the conveyor to the rail cart. This is the first machine which I've added an animation to. The idea for this is when an item is transferred from the conveyor to the rail cart, you'll see the item travel through the pipe in a sort of pumping action. This was a pretty simple animation to make actually, and was mostly just quite repetitive as I had to make this animation 4 times, once for each direction. I'll just show you the creation of one here. When it came around to actually coding the machine though, I decided to just make a placeholder to make sure the concept works before committing to setting up all the animations and everything in the game. You can see here how that works. The items travel down the conveyors as normal before entering the rail cart when it arrives at the machine. When I eventually put the actual machine into the game, I discovered that the machine arm didn't actually line up with where the carts stop on the rails. That was a pain, as it meant redrawing parts of the arm for every angle, and then also remaking the animations. Once I finally got through that tedious process, I got to this, with the arm aligning with the cart perfectly. I then coded the machine to trigger the animation whenever an item is transferred to a cart, and this was the final result. I need to make a few adaptations to the rail system to support multiple carts at once, but once that's added, the idea is that any number of these loaders can be placed in parallel on the rails to simultaneously fill multiple carts. The rails can then be used to transfer objects across the map or to the trading house, which I covered in a video a few months ago. Once I'd done all of that, I went away to Spain for a week. It somehow ended up the same temperature in the UK while I was away, but thankfully I had a beach and air conditioning while those at home didn't. It was good to get some sun and just chill out for a few days. Feeling rested, I came back and decided to tackle the height problem with the trees. As I said last time, I've had quite a few comments about how since redesigning the employees, the trees are now too small, which I totally agree with. The first thing I thought to do was to simply just raise the height of the tree trunks. On first attempt, it made some difference, but not a lot. The main issue I had with this design was that the trunks look super low in detail and don't really fit in colour-wise. This is when the tricky stuff began. Trying to design the trunks to look detailed while also fitting in with the art style wasn't actually that easy. After trying and exhausting the uneven shadow look, I then tried a gradient shadow down the trunk, like the foliage of the trees. That look felt a little bit sci-fi in a strange way and just didn't seem very realistic. I stuck with that design though for a little bit while I added grass around the bases of the trees. It turns out the grass was a pretty good idea and made the whole forest feel much more detailed and grounded the trees a bit more. I then faffed about with the tree trunks a bit more before finally arriving at this design. If you like this video and want to see more, feel free to subscribe. The channel's been growing much faster recently and I appreciate every one of you for watching. If that's not enough and you want to follow the game on Discord, I've left a link in the description. That's all for this week, cheers for watching.